Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sonic the Hedgehog here, and I'm back for some more of the Maxi Toys videos, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, Nintendo Wii U, PC Steam, and Nintendo 3DS. Jeez, 6 platforms all in one title. So anyways, last time we actually did the first half of the forms of the Sunshine Coast, and oops, I forgot to actually unlock Amigo right there, because one thing that makes it a little bit more of an off-putting for me is that after when you unlock the character, the game doesn't auto-save, unless if you're actually trying to get into a new challenge and stuff like that. So even though that's my only a little bit of a nitpicking going on there, but that's just how it is for me. So anyways though, today for this episode is the fact that we're going to be hopefully finishing up with Sunshine Coast and able to move on to the next area in your forms of World Tour. And the next character choice we're going to be selecting this time around though is the forms of Amy Rose. So even though we've pretty much at the halfway point of the forms of 10 default characters, but it forms whenever you start the main game. So anyways though, let's get started by the forms of this particular next new type of stage we're actually going to be run into. And it still is the race mission there. So even though, as usual, I'm gonna go for medium right there, because I need to actually go ahead and get myself a little bit easy going. Especially, with the rubber banding AI, as I mentioned this before at the very beginning of this particular portion of this Let's Play. But even though, let's get this started by the forms of this particular stage. I believe this is actually based off from Super Monkey Ball, basically, though, so I'm pretty sure it only has like one Super Monkey Ball stage instead of just only 3 in the forms of the original Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, because it normally has treetops from the forms of Jumble Jungle, and especially noticeable by the forms of Sandy Drifts, by the forms of Sandy Drifts in the forms of Treacherous Desert or something like that. And especially with Monkey Target in the forms of Pirate's Ocean for some reason, because despite the fact it wasn't stormy enough compared to it does in the forms of Banana Blitz counterparts. But even though, that's as far as I can really tell for that point or another. But anyway, so yeah, today was actually forms of the 21st of April, 2018, as you expected it to. We're pretty much almost at the very end of the April month at one point or another, which is really ridiculously fast, I have to say that much. But even though, that's as far as I can tell with that particular point's notice. Anyways though, let's go ahead and get our speed going, and I don't know who's actually in the lead at the moment, but I'll definitely know exactly what's going to be actually up ahead. But anyways though, let's go ahead and use the Hot Rod, and yeah, the Hot Rod is basically the item where you can able to actually use as a shockwave ability, so that way if you actually time the actual gauge employments just right, then you would able to actually perform yourselves the shockwave until you're able to actually temporarily stun your opponents, which even though that will be sounds, well, a handy thing if you might as well able to compensate on. So anyways though, what's the difference between your forms of, the character roster, as I mentioned this before, that normally in any other console versions of the game, they normally have the exact same amount of characters, depends on what version you'll be playing, but in forms of the Xbox 360, Nintendo Wii U, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation Vita. Obviously, the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita doesn't contain any of the exclusive playable characters, which I wish it could, but in forms of Ratchet & Clank or Crash Bandicoot, but of course Crash Bandicoot doesn't exist in the forms of, well, doesn't exist in 2012, which even though that might be a little bit of a tragic moment, but it wasn't until in 2016, they actually did manage to finally announce that Crash Bandicoot is finally back. Well, technically ever since during the likes of Skylanders Imaginators, which I'm more doubted by that, because even then though, I'm really glad that the, well, it's probably just me, but I'm pretty sure I was really glad that there's no Skylanders, I'm assuming Skylanders 7 has been announced during the likes of 2017, because I want to tell you right off the bat though, I'm getting pretty bored of how the fact that with the Skylander series though, very much, because I just don't know what it is. It's probably because of how the fact that I wasn't really a big fan of how the fact that I need to able to grind for some of these really crappy action figurines and all that stuff in order to actually just make it go like, proceeding on things, because that game rule requires you to able to actually get yourselves an action figure to able to get on things. So anyway, Oh yeah, there's something that's worth mentioning though, is the fact that this game did also came out on the forms of the iOS/Android devices and during the likes of in 2014, by the way. For those I haven't really mentioned about this and during the likes of earlier ago. But anyway though, so let's just go ahead and talk about the forms of well, by the forms of the differences of the playable characters departments. That if you ever played it, the PC version, it'll actually give you some opportunities that you might actually run into, not one, but three, but in forms of how the fact that if you ever play through Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed in the PC version owners, by the forms of Shun Gun, by the forms of Total War Shonogun, and General Winter from the company of Heroes, and Wilderness, by the forms of Total War Rome 2, and also judging by the fact they actually did manage to. Oh, I forgot about the another few amount of characters. I just realized another two of them, which are basically based off from third-party support. Which even though they've got Team Fortress, which is only exclusive to the PC owners. Like everyone knows about Team Fortress, especially noticeable in Team Fortress 2. Especially noticeable, they actually keep on making those SMM or SFM sequences, but in forms of only shorter films and all that stuff. But yeah, it's pretty cool if you ask me. Okay, so we have Temple Trouble, because that's what this level's named. Because even though that's as far as I can tell with that particular level's name. So anyways though, and especially noticeable with the Yogscast character, which is Simon, only exclusive to the PC as a free DLC back in during the likes of December 2013, which is pretty cool if you ask me, and that could be same applies to Williamus in the forms of back in during 2013 also, but except it's on August, and that one is also a free DLC. By the way, we actually come across into that particular slot machine, which it only costs you about 5 tokens, because yes, that's what happens if you collect those tokens throughout the corresponding course of the game. You wouldn't only able to actually spend on those tokens, but in forms of the slot machines, which can be summarized. You can get those some items if you want to get yourselves into the main action of those specific events and all that stuff. Like, take this for example, is the fact that I've got myself my 2 snowballs with me, and no matter what though, I can able to actually keep them on that particular event. Unfortunately though, that won't be helping me on this particular mission task though, on the other hand, because in this particular challenge, we have to do with a boost challenge. And basically the entire impression of this particular challenge is the fact that we need to able to actually finish that particular challenge within a certain amount of boosts as you can. And as you can see, I'm actually anticipating on harder difficulty right there, which actually brings us to 6 checkpoints. So I don't know how this will work out to be, but even then I will try my best if I was able to actually just make successful at times. But if not, I'm also able to actually decreasing it by the forms of, well, pretty much for the sake of everything. So anyway, there's something about the forms of how the fact that with the boost challenges in the forms of this particular game alone, normally of how the fact that it's specifically on the Wii U version of that particular challenges. Now normally in any other versions that they seem to have some questionable amount of checkpoints you can actually go through. But except on the Wii U version, when it first came out in day 1, because even then though, whenever it first came out in June, I'm assuming sometime in 16th or 18th of November sometime in 2012. But even though, there's one little major negative about it in forms of whenever it's like day 1 edition of the forms of this game in particular. Basically the entire impression of this particular, you know the challenge of this, right? Is by basically we need to keep on boosting before the time runs out. But you only have shorter amount of time, unless if you actually touch the boost pad until you're able to actually let the timer stop. Until for about, I would say 3 seconds, until like at minimum. So yeah, you're gonna have to keep on right on your toes before you're able to actually just continuously go ahead and do your boosting. Because even then, if you manage to let your time run out, then you have to redo the entire challenge again. So even then, I'm hoping it won't able to be happening right there. Well, thankfully though, if you manage to do a drifting mechanic, then this will also work with you. So even then, that's the only good thing about this for the most part though. So, no, Mr. Boost Pad. Oh. At least I can still hoping I can make it. No! No, 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 no. Son of a... I just really hate the fact that I just managed to lose my drifting if I managed to hit on the wall, though. I was one checkpoint off by getting that specific challenge completed. Hi. Oh well, at least I get some experiences after all, and it appears to be we're actually on the actual returning classic track, by the forms of you know, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. I just realized we actually ended up in Roulette Road, which I believe that was actually first originated by the forms of, well, the Chow Cup, obviously. So even then though, really glad that how the fact that that track makes a return, so even then though. And I believe by the forms of the original tracks throughout the majority of the game, normally it contains the exact same layouts of how it does in the forms of before, except how the fact that, you know, in the forms of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, normally it just has a lot of springs to bounce all over the place. I don't think it's noticeable in this particular section this time around though, because, well, normally it does not have any springs after all, so even then that makes it a hell of a lot more improvement there. And yeah, it's now being replaced as new forms of these little poker chips this time around though. Oh, thank god I didn't manage to touch that. So yes, if you managed to able to get this game at day 1, or in this case that was back in the day by the forms of 2012, there was actually a problematic by the forms of the Wii U version of the game, that the boost challenges, especially with the and the Burning Rages World Tour track, has been entirely broken in the forms of how the fact that, well, first off, we'd like to point things out with the forms of the boost challenges, is the fact that these checkpoints does not appear at all if you manage to first time playing through that particular game on your first run through, even if you don't have any updates installed in. Well, thankfully though, until it wasn't a point until when it gets to later points, until I'm presuming the end, at the very end of 2012 or something like that, thankfully it did manage to fix that update until everything else has gone suitable again, which even then I was really glad about that. Thankfully though, the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita versions, including the likes of the 3DS versions as well, thankfully though, they did manage to fix that already from the start, so even though it's just the Wii U version does have a little bit of issues by the forms of the lack of checkpoints, in the forms of, you know, the boost challenges and all that stuff. But good luck with the boost challenges, unless if you continuously keep on drifting, if you want to able to get into level 3 portion of drifting. And then that way you can able to actually keep your boost going until whenever you let the timer stops, until about a few seconds notice. So there we go, we've managed to success for that now, even though it only took me about 2 attempts on that one, so it's not too bad, not too much of a big of a deal, so now let's move on. And yeah, by the way, I'm using BD Joe for that one though, so even though I just want to point things out right away. So yeah, you know, there's not much else I can really talk for this point, but until when we get to the point when we get to the next couple of stages up ahead. So anyway, now we're done with that stage out of the way, and let's see what's up next. But I'm pretty sure that we can actually get into yet another Sonic stage, but I'm assuming this is actually based off from Starlight Carnival from Sonic Colors, which by the looks of all that, because I can tell for this little neon lights and all that stuff. And for this particular track, I'm actually going to be using Mimi this time around as the forms of the second Super Monkey Ball playable character in the forms of this particular game, although she's technically a newcomer to the forms of the Sonic Racing games after all. I mean, she did make her appearance in the forms of how the fact that with the forms of Sega Superstars Tennis, except the fact that in Sega Superstars Tennis, that normally you have to unlock her before you're able to actually play as her. But in this game, you can actually unlock her from the stars, which is even then is really, really awesome. So anyways, here we go, by the forms of the Starlight Carnival course, but ultimately this track is known as Galactic Parade. Yeah, it's called Galactic Parade because of the fact that the actual premise of this stage, well, it feels exactly like how it does it for the forms of Rainbow Road, obviously, because even though we're going to be traversing for those little visible roads and all that stuff, and traversing for the inside portions of the factories themselves and all that stuff, which is really, really cool. Seriously, I really love Starlight Carnival in the forms of the original. Oh god, my controls are in reverse. I just did not realize that from the start though, but anyway though. Yeah, because as a result though, I actually do really enjoy the original Starlight Carnival, you know, the entire stage in the forms of the original Sonic Colors game, because in the Sonic Colors game, it makes it absolutely gorgeous, especially in on Nintendo Wii back in the day. Well, I kind of wish they actually did make their re-release version of Sonic Colors until when it gets these, the PlayStation 4 version, or especially noticeable with the Xbox One version, or the PC version of the game. I know there's technically a PC version on it, by the forms of made by someone, alongside with Sonic 06 or something like that. I'm not exactly 100% sure on that one. But anyways though, so here's the main premise of this particular course itself, is the fact that we need to able to come across into multitude of sections, which, by the looks of it though, it's not too bad if you're able to know what you're doing. Ah, crap. What's up with computer AI? It's extremely cheap. And even then though, they just really desperately want to get your items. How the hell? It's one of those lasers. I'm pretty sure it's one of those lasers that managed to hurt me right there. Anyway though, but enough about that. So yeah, there's another thing I'd like to point out at this point, folks. Recently I've managed to order myself another version of Donkey Kong Country, but this time around though I've managed to able to order myself Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Color. Now you might be thinking, that was about 3 or technically 4 and what the Christ is all that about? I think my momentum is actually screwed over right there. That's totally my fault there. Oh god, spawns. We have to avoid them at all costs. So anyways though, that was about 4 versions of the game I've got at the moment when it comes to Donkey Kong Country. Now, technically I won't count for Donkey Kong Land 1 because Donkey Kong Land 1 is basically entirely different compared to what it does in Donkey Kong Country because the story is pretty much different and also the world's environments usually kind of different a little bit. So, technically I've now got 3 versions of Donkey Kong Country because between the Super Nintendo version and the Game Boy Advance version, well, the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance version, both they had 40 levels each, but it forms of depends on what version you'll be playing. On the other hand, on the Game Boy Color version, it actually contains 41 stages because there's actually one exclusive stage in the forms of the Game Boy Color version, but in forms of Nutty Night or Necky Nightmare. I'm pretty sure that's what the stage is known as, which is basically a cave-based level. Which I did not even notice that right from the start though, as soon as I'm able to research on all that stuff. Which even then though, might be still looking forward to see how that version plays out. But I'm sure enough, I know there's some people usually complain about the forms of how the physics or the timing aspect about that version's gone a little bit more, tap bit more worse than that. But even then, I might give this a chance though if I manage to able to actually get my hands on the Game Boy Color version because, you know, I've already completely done with the forms of Sonic, no, not Sonic, Donkey Kong Land 1 and during a couple of days ago, so I need to get into Donkey Kong Land 2 before I'm able to actually, oh god, why is the rubber banding AI is getting way too much in these days? Oh, that's ooh la la. Decides to able to reverse my controls, that's just plain rude. Oh gosh, I'm almost gonna get screwed over right there. And unfortunately, this is where the point I might as well get second place yet again after the events of Carrier Zone, funny forms of Afterburner Track, which is a little bit more, well, sad honestly, because even then though, I just always kept on getting screwed over by the forms of rubber banding AI sometimes in this game. But normally, that's my only major gripe I have with the game though, at least from my opinion though anyway, because the rubber banding AI sometimes get really, really damn cheap. Well, thankfully though, this is on medium level, not the hard mode, because if this was on hard mode, that would be really unfair if you're actually able to know what I'm talking about for that point or another, but there we go. That concludes Galactic Parade, as what the actual stage is known for. Yeah, the forms of you can see on the background right there, but the forms of the Flagman. Bright Star is actually the host of the Flagman this time around though, as opposed to Knights in the forms of the first game this time around, which even then, that could be only being for one thing, I wonder, but it wasn't until when we get to the future points of the game. Well, at least for that particularly, World Tour mode. So there we go, that concludes that particular race. So yeah, it's a pretty fun, enjoyable run through, but not the greatest in my opinion, but hey, at least we can able to now move on. And speaking of which, we've now pretty much done with the Sunshine Coast. So even now, as you can see, we actually unlocked the next gate, and we can now able to actually proceed through the next area in the forms of World Tour mode. And this case will actually lead us to Frozen Valley. Now, differently from the first world, but in forms of Sunshine Tour, and no, not Sunshine Tour, Sunshine Coast, is the fact that this particular area right there, Frozen Valley, actually holds up to 2 unlockable characters, as opposed to how it does it in the first area. Let's go ahead and use Ooh La La this time around, because yeah, in the Sunshine Coast, it only has like 1 unlockable character, but in forms of, you know, Amigo. And speaking of Amigo, we're about to be going back into Samba Studios, but now we're going to be doing a proper race this time instead of like the actual versus races. So that's pretty much it when it comes to that particular point in mind. So even then, let's get this thing started right there as soon as this loading time has been over with. And yeah, sometimes that my game sometimes can get a little bit more glitchy when it comes to sound loading times and all that stuff. But at least I could be pretty much okay and optimistic about that. So anyways, here we go with, some studios, which I've already established that before. I'm pretty sure this is actually based off on the movie theater or something like that. Granted, we've already been in there before, but technically we haven't done a proper race about that. So even though that makes it pretty obvious with that one point. So yeah, with that being said though, oh man, the water textures do look absolutely gorgeous, especially this is on the Xbox 360 version, compared to the 3DS version on the other hand. You know, I've already mentioned this before, how the fact that how downgraded the visuals were in the 3DS version, and to make matters worse than that in the 3DS version is that sometimes the game tends to lag a little bit on the 3DS version, I think, because normally in the console version it runs just perfectly fine. But at least in the PC version, you know, it runs at 60 frames per second after all. But in the 3DS version did run very, very badly at one point, or have you. Although surely it shares the exact same gameplay style as far as you already know. I should probably mention about this also is the fact that differently from the console version than the likes of the 3DS version, I'd like to point things out, is the fact of the matter is how the fact that how much players you're able to race against with. But in forms of the console versions of the game, you normally race against with 10 players. But in the 3DS version, you race against with 8 normal regular players, just like how it does it in your forms of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, the console versions. Because in the DS version of, you know, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, it only holds up to 6 players. Actually, I just want to point things out right away though, because I will be able to actually be doing a Let's Play of the forms of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing on the DS version at some point at the very end of this year in particular. Let me tell you up front, I did not like that version. I mean, sure it's fine all in all, but it's just that there's one major gripe I have with the DS version of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, mind you, and that is the unfair AI at one point or another, because they can really sometimes really try to catch you up if you do not get enough speed going, which even now that can get. It may have a lot of causes of usage, but it forms of how the fact that I might able to lose some of these races very, very fast. Even especially noticeable how the fact that now normally Piclet already accomplished by the forms of the Xbox 360 version of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Let's Play back in during about, you know, at the very end of 2017. About the fact that he did manage to tackle through advanced difficulty no problem, except for some of the races. But I don't know if we can able to actually cope with the higher difficulty in the DS version, because they can really sometimes really catch you up. Let me know in the comments below if we'd like to able to do the 3DS version of the forms of Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed as well. Although it might be too late for now, because it already has like only one save file, because even then though, unlike in Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing on the Nintendo DS, normally has like 3 save files. But in Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, specifically on the 3DS version, it only has like 1 save file, which to me is kind of underwhelming honestly, but even then, that's as far as I can really tell at this point in time. But anyways. But I can tell you how the fact that why I just really think that the 3DS version is considerably a little bit weakest, but in forms of whatever version you'll be playing through. But anyways though, come on, I need to get into first place. I'm hoping I can get in first place. Oh, Glide Wing, thank you very much. That way it gets the job done, and booyah, there we go. Now we're pretty much done with the forms of this particular race. Awesome. Alright, so as the game auto-saves until the game tells me that I've only got just only 2 stars, not 3 stars. I could normally try to go for this on hard mode, but of course, since the rubber banding AI is getting really rapidly ridiculous compared to it does in the forms of, you know, the original Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing to me though, because I have no issues with the forms of the AI in that game. But in this, that could be a bit of a problematic for me though, even when I get to the higher difficulties and all that stuff, which to me that's kind of a problematic though for me. So anyways though, now we've done with that event out of the way, and now we'll move on to the next challenge, but in forms of Traffic Attack. And we're going back into Shrimpian downtown ever since during the likes of the Sunshine Coast. And now we're going to be doing with a different type of mission. So let's go for medium again. And this time we're going to wreck everything. I'm going to wreck it. Which was Ralph. If you remember from the forms of the film called Wreck-It Ralph, Ralph is actually joining this game this time around, which is very, very awesome, because considering how the fact that this game, as far as this title suggests, it calls it Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed instead of like Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed, because that would be a very, very long title. But because of how the fact they actually did remove Sega as a name as a title this time around, though, this actually meant is that they're actually now going to be introduced into the third-party characters, mainly Wreck-It Ralph, for example. Now, how the fact that it's actually based off from the Disney movie, doing it at the exact same year as the forms of how the fact that, well, between Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, especially noticeable with Wreck-It Ralph, both came out on the exact same year as each other in during the likes of in 2012, and during the likes of the exact same month too, I think, but the forms of Wreck-It Ralph came out first as the forms of the film, well, at least in North America though anyway, because until when it gets to the UK version, has to wait until in 2013. And speaking of in 2013, you know the 3DS version came out in the forms of the 2013 year, which even I know that might be sounds a little bit more of a difference though anyway. So anyways, yeah, it's pretty cool to see how Wreck-It Ralph joins in for the forms of the Sonic game for once. I kind of wish it actually joins in, but in forms of the next Super Smash Bros. Game. Well, I wish it might be wannabe, because even I know that Wreck-It Ralph 2 will be on its way, enjoying the likes of the theaters, but in forms of Ralph breaking the internet, which even I know I was really looking forward to that film actually, because you know I fully enjoyed the first film after all, and it is probably one of the uniquest Disney films of all time in my opinion, just because it almost feels exactly similar to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, except, well, it's in computer generated and all that stuff, as you probably already know. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the second film. It's going to be coming out in June at some point throughout this year. I'm hoping it might actually contain many forms of the Super Smash Bros. Fighter in the Nintendo Switch. But if not, then I'm actually able to actually go like, oh, that's kind of stinks. But anyway. So a traffic attack, as far as this objective suggests, is that we need to keep on going through those particular phrases, even for the forms of the different parts of the actual mission itself. And if you manage to keep on going through those particular gates, or these waves rather, as what it says here, then you would normally move on to the next. So even then, you have to dodge green cars, yellow cars, and even blue cars. So even then, with the green cars are very self-explanatory, they're simply just drive forward. However though, when it comes to the yellow car and the blue car, well, the yellow car can simply just move all over the place. But that doesn't even compare to how it does it in the blue cars, because the blue cars can able to actually home in on you, because they can be act out like police cars, because they can actually get ourselves a sound alarm of anything like that. So anyways, we got another boost challenge. Let's just go and go for this particular next course right here, but it forms off based off from Skies of Arcadia. And let's go ahead and use, I'm actually going to be saving Amigo for the next video, because I'm really low on time at the moment. So let's go ahead and use one of our DLC character by himself, Metal Sonic. Now, as far as you can see by the forms of Metal Sonic right there, as you can see, there are 7 mods in total, which that could be something ranging from, there are 7 of them in total. So we have Standard mod, Handling, Acceleration, Speed, Boost, Balance, and a Console mod. So yeah, as you can see, that it actually says MD, based off from Mega Drive, because, you know, Metal Sonic's first appearance was obviously in Sonic CD, because it's basically based off from the Mega CD. But anyways, though, as you can tell, that he's actually fully leveled up in Level Star. Means that he's actually unlocked every single mod throughout the majority of the game. So even then, though, yeah, he can be really, really overpowered if you're able to actually know what the right, you know, mods you're going to be able to use. But even now, let's get started by the forms of, well, the Skies of Arcadia track, or in this case, the actual race course. I believe this particular course itself is actually called, Rogue's Landing, or in this case, well, just Rogue's Landing. I'm pretty sure that's what the actual, course itself is named. So anyways, let's get to it. So yeah, for Metal Sonic, obviously he makes a return ever since during the likes of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, as you already know. And, you know, just like last time, that he can be, actually accessed to the forms if you ever have yourselves a limited edition. If you notice, if you ever purchased the Xbox 360 version, PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita version, and the Nintendo 3DS version. On the other hand, though, on the Wii U version, if you manage to actually access to the special edition version of this particular game, you actually unlock Metal Sonic from the start. So even though you don't have to worry about the complicated internet settings or anything like that. So As far as speaking of such, I want to classify for saying for this, right, is that I first got this game by the forms of backing during the likes of Christmas 2012. The first ever version I've got with the forms of this game is actually on the Xbox 360 version, so that I can get used to with this game. And the second version I've got is the forms of the Wii U version, because I'm going in a slightly in a different order, compared to how it does in the forms of its predecessor, or anything else for that relatable. And, also, I've managed to get myself the 3DS version for a third version of the game, being more of a downgraded version of the forms of any other console entries. But there's only a few missing versions. I'm actually able to pick things up, and that's the forms of the PlayStation 3 version, just for the sake of trophies. And that could be the same applies for the PlayStation Vita, which is the only Sonic game to be released on the PlayStation Vita, which is really bizarre. I think this is mainly due to how the fact that the PlayStation Vita sells so poorly in the other countries, unlike how it does in the Japanese. It does sell very, very well in Japan, probably due to how the fact that the forms of the tons of Japanese RPG types of games that recently came out in the forms of the PlayStation Vita system, which is kind of convenient there, but you know. So anyways though, let's go ahead and just fly all the way to the outer horizon there. Oh yeah, there's something that's one to point things out right away though for this point, folks. Normally, originally back in during the likes of the forms of the NES Remakes Let's Play, that originally normally Mario was trying to say he wasn't able to actually come back to that game until the 12th of June. This is probably due to the Nintendo's E3 is about to be on this horizon. Somehow Mario decided to able to push it forward a little bit until when it gets to the point until at the very end of April. That's only because of how the fact that he just wants to get that game finished before before I decide to jump into NES Remakes 2 before when it gets to the second half of the year. Means starting from July all the way up to December at the very end of this year so far, at least as far as I'm concerned with that. So anyway, the third and final lap will actually going to be the main focus of this is the forms of just flying through the air, obviously. I've definitely heard of Skies of Arcadia before, but of all the Dreamcast games that you might actually just consider picking it up or play, the Dreamcast version of the forms of Skies of Arcadia was actually super rare and expensive. I don't know what it is, probably because of the different tastes of the RPG differences to be like this, unlike how it does in Final Fantasy or the forms of Super Mario RPG or something like that. I'm not 100% sure on that, but at least that's something's worth mentioning though for that point of view, for that point. So, oh crap, who might have done that? Ralph, what are you doing? You're supposed to be my friend. Although I really need to get in first place though. But again, this was on medium mode, so I don't have to worry about getting first place though. But if this was on hard mode, then again, I will be doubly get screwed right there. Especially noticing what there's too many obstacles in my way. And even with the rubber banding AI can really desperately get the items they really desperately need. That can get a lot of potentials of how the fact that I keep on mentioning the rubber banding AI for that one point or another. So anyways, yeah, with the forms of the continuation of the forms of the rest of the very end of the forms of the NES Remakes Let's Play, that's what Mario is about to be doing. That will make a comeback and during the likes of the 28th of April, just to let you all know. And of course, there's no need for experience points. Yeah, Sex Ropes Landing by the forms of the Skies of Arcadia stage's name. So anyways, so yeah, just to let you know, because of all the fact that Mario needs to definitely to get to finishing up with the first installment of NES Remakes before jumping to the sequel. But normally, as for Ultimate NES Remakes, that version will not count because it's on the 3DS. And plus, well, there's no need for me to able to restart the entire game again. So now let's unlock the new character, which is Danica Patrick. Huh. That's pretty weird for the player's choice. I'm presuming that she's actually based off from Hot Wheels, which is really cool. But I'm afraid, guys, we have to end things off here, so join me next time on Let's Play Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. We're about to be still continue on with Frozen Valley, so see you guys next time. Later, fellas.